All right, we are live. How's it going, y'all?
It's good. We were talking about improv before we started, and I still
Hmm.
want to talk about improv. We can continue to do
Yeah.
that.
What we do is not well. It's sort of improv in that we
I was like,
usually
it's
only have a
heavily
very
improv.
rough plan.
It's
It's
heavily
not
improv.
improv comedy though. It's just not improv funny. It's
I
just
know we
improv
could.
chaotic.
We'll try and
Hold
be a
on.
lot funnier this time.
I
Uh
did again.
oh.
I did it again.
This
I
is.
fixed it. I fixed it.
It's pathetic.
I
Pathetic.
know. I know. So professional.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us to this week's edition of Agent Talk with Seth and Dongwan. As you know by now, unless you don't, this is a weekly live stream where two agents we come together. We talk about the various aspects of business, really in hopes to provide you with education, information, and perspective on the agenting business that hopefully replaces some of the other more expensive avenues of trying to get this. Basically, we want you to come join us. Reminder to writers who are watching, anytime we refer to you as a writer that we want to like steal all your stuff from, we don't really mean it. No, I'm joking. But this is more for agents, not for insider writer baseball. As you know, the show is free, but we would love for you guys to kick in a few bucks to people in color in publishing, which Dongwan just put a link down there on the bottom. So thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about an issue that is, sort of very nitty gritty and has a lot of different aspects to it. And we've been receiving various questions along these lines throughout the whole process. So we wanted to dive into it now. And I think that I'm going to probably at some point, I actually did some research for this across industry, and I got some responses back, and I'll have more. So if anything breaks from what I'm talking about right here, I'll make sure to like throw in a minute update in a future episode. But so basically, we're talking about salary. We're talking about expectations. We're talking about transitions from being an assistant to being an agent. It's sort of a weird, different thing. So we wanted to let you know where things are in the industry, what you should be looking for, and how you can go from there throughout this process. Dongwan said to me when we started here that I'm going to lead the charge on some of this because he had an interesting transition. But I say, no, you have an example of what any person at any sort of different place could, theoretically be in there with. And we both. Yeah, go on.
I think that's one of the takeaways, of this show generally, and of this situation in particular, is that there's so many different ways to do this, and everyone's going to have a really different experience, and we all have our own weird paths of getting into this, and how we engage with the process, how we move through our careers. Before we dive in, though, I'm kind of curious because we talked about doing this a little bit more, and I kind of want to bring it in, and I'm blindsiding you a little bit because we didn't talk about it before, but. How's your week been? What's been going on for your what's happening in your world right now? Whatever you can talk about, real high level summary, but life of an agent. What's going on?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. First of all, I'm really excited about your updates. There's going to be some big congratulations coming along, so that's going to be really fun. What's happened that's been really interesting is that I have 2 books pubbing next week that have. They've been a long time in the process, and they're both literary books, and they have all these interesting issues with them. Not necessarily negative, but one of them is called The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, and she was just longlisted for the Booker Prize, which is really exciting.
Dang.
And that's my first Booker Prize nomination, which is really cool.
Congrats, man. That's huge.
Thank you. And so just so you know, guys, they changed the rules whereby Americans who were published in the UK could be part of the process, and that was not recently, but not so long ago either. So some of my other big literary clients who maybe I had a chance weren't even part of that process. So it's kind of exciting and everything. But what's most exciting is that book is so good, and this is where I might get in trouble, but the publication was lining up to be fine. And maybe not anything more than that. And this is one of the first times in my career that a singular thing has allowed me as an agent to really kickstart something at the publishing level. So as soon as this Booker Prize thing happened, our push in publicity, I got the publisher, which is HarperCollins, to spend more money on ads and marketing, which is very rare. I got like direct communication with the publisher of the entire company. We got all sorts of more things happening just because this book hit like the most prestigious prize list in the world, and not even short list, the long list of it. So that's been like a really interesting experience, and sort of fun experience to be able to see this something go from a fine publication to what's going to be a good publication and hopefully a great one. So we'll see, especially if she gets shortlisted or and then the other, sorry,
that's man, and good luck,
Yeah.
But go on. Yeah.
I was just going to say, because then on the other side of it, I have a book that the edit, it's publishing at Knopf, the editor. Oh gosh, it's such a long story. I won't even go into that one, but it's a book called Zoe that's really wonderful by Xander Miller, and Knopf is publishing it. And it's just sort of one of those things where when an editor leaves, you have to find your way around things, and it's been a process, especially in light of everything that's going on nowadays. And we could talk a little bit more about that at some time. Maybe we can have an issue about like challenging publications and what we learned from it. Okay.
Well, actually, I would love to do an episode just on orphaned books, right?
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting challenge that we run into all the time.
we'll bring pictures and stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hear your good news. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I had a good week at the Hugo Awards last weekend. The ceremony was a complete shit show, and you can read a lot about that everywhere else on the internet. But I had some really nice news, which, two of my projects took home Hugo Awards. That's Arkady Martins, A Memory Called Empire, and Max Glasson and Amal El-Matar, who was a guest on the show, for This Is How You Lose the Time War in Novella. I also had Sarah Gailey up in Novelette. So it was really nice just to have, 3 awards closing out the night, 2 of them wins. So it's a good way to ring out the week. And, when you get those awards, a lot of attention comes in, right? So we've had a lot of sort of inbound requests for translation, for film and TV. I think these are the ways in which awards can really matter, is they can really unlock a lot of interest sort of outside the publishing industry. Both those books have been out for a while, because they came out last year. So there's been, quite a bit of attention for them over time, but they've sort of like had their book journey already in a lot of ways, right? They were launched, they sold a lot, Memory was in hardcover and now paperback. And so they've gone through all these different steps. So the award coming in isn't necessarily about book sales, although it has been nice book sales. One of the publishers actually shared with me hour by hour sales over the course of the Hugo ceremony. Wow, it was very interesting to watch how that went. So there is an impact on sales. It's not as big, I think, as people think it is, but it is real and it is quite nice. But really, it's subrights where awards, I think, really kick in. I remember a couple years ago at the awards ceremony, the producer of Arrival was on stage talking about it, and he was like, yeah, I read the story, or I saw that it won a Hugo, so I read the story, and then I was like, this is great, and then we turned it into a movie. And, it's obviously not that simple, but, I think that is a sign that film and TV translation overseas, those areas really look to the awards to figure out what they should be paying attention to. So it's a nice shorthand for people who aren't really deep in it like me and Seth are.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there's so many other things when you have that listed, like most libraries will pick that book up if they hadn't had it before now, or, it just is sort of an expansion of brand. And it's also the future, right? Even with the long list for the Booker, Diane Cook is going to be able to say she was long listed for the Booker. And that will be something that trails her around. So, that's what awards are about, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
In a similar way, just one last point, Max, this is his first win. He's been obviously writing for a while, but he was nominated for the first Hugo Series Award. And it was kind of like what you're talking about with the Booker long list. That was such an opportunity for me to go to the publisher and be like, hey, you guys need to be pushing Max more, right? This is a sign, even though he didn't win, I think he lost to Lois McMaster-Bujold. So of course, she's going to win. But it was still an opportunity for me to go back to the publisher and be like, hey, you guys need to be paying more attention to this, putting more effort behind it. And then I think that led to a bigger launch for his next book, Empress of Forever. So those are ways in which those awards can be really useful strategically over the long term. Even though elsewhere you'll find me being very critical of awards and how they're done, but they do have impact and they are important. Anyways.
Yeah, I really wish the Hugos were just like not the Hugos, but still have the respect of the Hugos. You know? All right, we'll talk about that.
Yep.
Back to the topic. Occasionally, by the way, I am checking because I have like queries out right now that I've like wanted to provide even more information for you guys. But so we're going to talk about a lot of a number of different things here, and we'll try and zoom through some of it. But one of the things to initially start with is just like what should your expectations be in terms of pay, and this is like really gets to the heart of one of the major issues in publishing, right? Is introductory salaries in an expensive city, and how we're supposed to survive and and exist on that. Especially the fact is that most of the time you're not getting an assistant job out the bat. You need to be an intern, or like that's where like the expectations lie. So I do think there has been a big shift from unpaid to paid internships, which is good. But paid internship, our company pays a minimum wage or up to $15 an hour or something like that. And that's not going to keep you moving too much. When I started as an intern, it's important to date us here. It was 2005, 2004. 2005. I started at Don Moss, and I got paid, which is great, and then hourly. But the other reason why I was able to survive as well is that they paid me. First of all, I stayed at my aunt's apartment. We've already talked about this, but I stayed at my aunt's apartment, and I made money reading books. They gave me an additional amount of money for reading a full book, which is, we don't do that. I've never even heard of that otherwise. It's very nice. And I just zoomed through books and received like extra chunks of cash. But those were desperate days.
So at Sterling Lord, you weren't getting paid for readers' reports?
You're getting paid for readers' reports at Sterling Lord?
Yeah, I was getting paid for readers' reports.
You see, this is exactly what we're talking about here. Sterling Lord specifically was a place of fiefdoms where there were, different people had different kind of setups. And I want you to talk about Chris, your boss, because he's a perfect example of a carved out fiefdom, or Charlotte Sheedy or other people there. Mine, I had 3 bosses, and at the time they were well respected, not at all junior agents, but they also were still on the younger side, still building their reputation. Right now, they're all, partners in various places. And I think it was a different thing. So the bosses you have also do matter about like what you get and how
Hugely.
They do things. Yeah. So I just had a salary. I had a flat salary of $27,000. Yes, that's what I had at the time. And what did you have going in?
I went in at 32, and in
what the fuck?
I know. That's the thing, and because I had a job prior to, I'd interned for 2 summers at WNET, and so I had a full time, as a research PA for Bill Moyers for a year. So I was taking a pay cut to come to Sterling Lord. So I was coming from a 35. So I negotiated a little bit. Calhoun, I think, got me to something like 29, I think, officially, and then, paid me cash under the table, the rest of it out of his pocket, right? Because he couldn't get the other partners to agree to the 32 because it would have been unfair to the other assistants, as Seth's reaction is now demonstrating. But it was a really, it's a weird situation, right? And I knew I was getting paid more than other people. I negotiated for that rate. There's a lot of structural stuff that goes into that, right? Like I was in a position where I could push back, right? And, I think just to recognize the thing, I think being a dude, I think coming from a certain amount of privilege, I had the tools to argue for that. And it was easier for me just to ask for the thing and then get the thing than I think it is for a lot of people. Right. So,
well, to be fair, as also the dude, like I understand the situation where you're stepping in and you just really desperately want it. Right. It wasn't just that I was looking for a job. The job at Sterling Lord was like my dream job in that position. I mean, David Mitchell was literally my favorite author, and I got to work for his agent. And, like having that kind of stuff, like, sure, I said something about something, I don't know, but like, and good on you for pushing, but it's a natural thing to not even know what you're supposed to be dealing with.
Yeah.
Part of what we're trying to do is give you some context here. And
I want you guys who are watching this to understand that when you're being hired in that position, you can ask for that, right? They're not going to, I mean, they'll probably say no, right? But it would be it would be a wild ass thing to do to rescind the offer of employment just because you asked for a pay bump. You know what I mean? And also, if they do that, you do not want to work for those people because that's a sign of a boss who is not going to respect your time, not going to respect you as a person. And if they don't appreciate you being willing to fight for yourself and negotiate for yourself, then they're going to treat you like trash the rest of the time.
Yeah,
right?
You're not going to get a pay bump in the future either. Right.
Exactly. And I recognize sometimes you need that job more than you need that bump. And sometimes any job is better than no job. But if you don't have to take it, then you're better off not working for that person, in my opinion, right?
I agree. Now, I want to do some straight talk here as well. As someone who's been in a position to hire 2 assistants now, and my assistants have been with me they were with me for a long period of time, so it could even have been more. There are things that you can say that sometimes is a turn on, sometimes to a turn off. And I'm not just talking about generalized, hey, this is how you interview. But because I know some of you are going to have this in your mind. And I think that it's worth just talking about really briefly. Like the 2 things I'm thinking about, especially in our specific industry, is one, being a writer, because like that question might come up, especially if you went to an MFA program like I did, hey, do you want to be a writer? Like, what's the thing? Because in an agent's mind, it's like, are you just using this and just going to check out and are going to leave? Now, I think it's totally valid as a boss just to want to know that your person is going to be around, is not just like hopping to come and go. However, I don't think you should be afraid to say you want to be a writer. I just think that it's worth making sure that you recognize that a boss wants you to be, they're going to want you around a bit. So it's all about the process of how you connect with that it's not just like, yeah, I want to be a writer and I want to get out of here the second I get my thing, you know? And then the other thing is
because you want to show you have goals, right? You want to show that you do want to be an agent. You're here to learn the business. You want to be a writer. It's okay to have those goals, but don't forget that the thing that you're interviewing for is a very specific job, which is being an assistant, right? You need to be good at that job first and foremost, because that is the thing that they are hiring you for and paying you for. Now, all of that said, have your goals and be building towards those. And you want to work for someone who's going to help you build towards those goals. But you do have a job first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to follow up, the other really totally valid thing that you should be asking, but recognize that there's a really tricky way to ask it. And I'm just being frank here, is if you want to be an agent, then you want to know when you get to start taking people on, right? And that's something that you might want to ask in the beginning, is just, like, what is your thoughts? Like, I do want to be an agent. I want to be around here forever. What's the process of mentorship towards me becoming an agent? However, what you don't want to do is come in and say, I want to be an agent. I want to start taking on people in 6 months, because that is the opposite. And again, I'm not trying to say like, paddle foot around and like, don't support yourself. But again, just towards what Don was just saying, like, I'm less likely to hire someone who doesn't want to be an assistant and just wants to hop right in and immediately start taking on. What I want to do is be a mentor and help you learn all those things while also you doing the assistant job. And I think
realistically, I mean, the point of this whole show is that like being a full agent is freaking hard, man. Like there's a lot to learn, and it's a thing that sometimes looks very easy from the outside. Even when you are working as an assistant, sometimes it will seem easy, and then once you start having to do it yourself, it's 1,000 times harder than you ever expected, right? So, I also would want to be in that position, hiring someone who is realistic about what it takes, is, understanding that they have a lot to learn. Because me, 15 years into my career, feel like I have so much to learn. And every day I'm coming up against stuff where I'm like, oh boy, this is a whole set of problems, a whole set of questions, or an area of the business. I don't know shit about this, right? And so then I got to go to my colleagues. I got to learn by doing all those different things. You're never going to stop learning new stuff as you go through this. So if you're walking in the door and acting like you know everything and you're ready to start taking people on, that's a sign, that would be a sign to me that, you got a long way to go in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes people come over as an intern and they are a little bit more ready, but um,
Yeah.
I think that
All
people
that said, there are
yeah.
situations, we were talking with Sarah the other week where, she was taking someone on immediately. And, I think um, that can work out beautifully, right? But those are very incidental and very, very specific outcomes. So.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is basically the art of
Mhm.
presentation and negotiation,
Yeah.
which is really just making sure that you are both getting what you need and giving what is needed. Is on both sides of it. Okay, so let's get to some.
Okay, we've gotten stuck on becoming an assistant.
Okay,
we
well,
a little bit here. So
let me get to specifics. And I asked around. I don't have full answers all the way around, but I'm not going to give any names of agencies either. However, what I've been hearing now is that first of all, I'll also say the editorial range tends to be a little bit higher. It comes with more solid benefits because they're they're like big companies. Now, a place like WME, for instance, which I might or might not have asked about. I might or might not have asked them. I'm getting details on that, but they said that they just started giving their assistants a raise. So though sometimes you have to start in a mailroom at a place like that. But they're going to have like a much more solid benefit kind of game, and I think this is something also to be paying attention to about what you care about if you want to wear a suit and tie. But the 32,000 to 36,000 is the range I've been hearing currently. So that is up from where we were, though apparently it's exactly where Dongwon was.
I mean, but again, I was getting paid that 15 years ago, right? And that's not a big bump for
I'm not trying to say that
it's a great, you know what I mean? So
no, I'm not trying to say it's a great play because I know back when we started, editorial was 35. So agenting is already like at a lower place. But I know that every other place I spoke to and referencing that said like, I don't have the details. I'll let you know right now, but I know that we're competitive and refiguring that out right now. So I actually do think the range is around 32 to 35, somewhere around 35 as the current range. Now, again, this is in New York City. This is a real problem. Like, it's not a good thing. It's a hard place to be, and that's the reality. So that's like your entry setup. So one thing I want to talk about also is that some places ask you to sign a contract and some places don't. Some places will take a little bit of time and then ask you to sign a contract. Like if someone asks you to sign a contract, then you're an assistant, you're going to have to sign that contract if you're going to have to work with them. But that is another place of negotiations. And one of the things that you are negotiating there are really the most important things is really figuring out your next steps, right? And that is the two things I just want to make sure you have on your radar. If you're talking about that, aside from like days off and whatever, and you negotiate that to however you want, that's any job anywhere. The things to pay attention to here are your splits and commissions, and we are going to dive into that heavily in a second. And the other is your splits if you leave, and I think honestly that's like the most important thing.
Those are the two big levers, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about any of that?
Yeah, I think you can speak to splits a little bit better than I can, but it's really important to think about what happens if you leave that agency. In this business, people move a lot, right? People go off to start their own agencies, they move to a different agency, all those kind of things. So there is a range of things that happens if you leave your agency. From you get nothing of no part of the commission for any project that you sold while at that agency, right? You see that a lot. That's actually pretty common where your current agency would keep all the revenue if you left, right? There are other agencies that will do a split, right? Where you get some percentage, sometimes a very small percentage, sometimes a pretty decent percentage. That is a negotiable kind of thing. There's also ways that you can buy out your contracts, right? So if you pay them a certain amount of money, and oftentimes your new agency will help you with that, or not oftentimes, but you can ask your new agency to help you buy out your old contracts, and then that way you have control over your backlist. You always have control over it, but then you're getting the revenue from your backlist, and then that will help spend down your debt to your new agency, right? So you need to think about your past sales as an income stream, and that income stream has a certain dollar value to it over time. And so learning to think about what your past sales revenue is and how much that's going to be valued at going forward is really important in thinking about what happens when you leave this agency. And I recognize it can be super daunting when you're just starting out and you haven't sold anything yet and you have no idea if you're going to be successful at this or not at all, but always plan for success, right? What happens if you have a huge literary bestseller that you then want to move on to another agency? What happens to the revenue from that book?
Well, so one thing that's, and everything I want to say is right. And, one thing that's really important is that the difference between editorial and agenting, like editors leave and they don't take their books with them. So their leaving is not weaponized. When an agent leaves, it's weaponized because you take the clients, which means you take income, right? So maybe you're not taking any clients and they all want to stay. That's the agent's choice. That's the author's choice, but they also can choose to go with you. Or maybe you don't have any money-making clients and it's no big deal. But, I didn't have a contract when I was leaving, and had a verbal agreement to take a percentage, and that verbal agreement was rescinded for some reason. It's caused some real like relationship bursts, and also financial things because just like Don Juan said, one of my clients sold a million copies, The Tiger's Wife, in the States alone. And I got very little of that, almost nothing of that. And then I found out literally yesterday, there's a book that came to me with an offer, like a world offer from like a small, it's called What the Fuck Should I Make for Dinner? Like a silly, hilarious cookbook and spiral thing.
I think I have that book.
Listen, but it's a great book. And because of like the search engine of the word fuck during the holiday season, we have sold 425,000 copies of that book.
God damn.
So that guy makes between $60,000 and $120,000 every Christmas, of which none of it comes to me. And we have 4 other books together. I still rep him. We still do all these things together, but you lose those things, which is why the future for other things, we have a different kind of thing. So one thing that you could do also is you can negotiate basically like a vesting, like sort of like, stock wise, whereby you start and you incentivize yourself to being around. So you get maybe nothing or a small amount of the amount of money's coming in if you leave within the first year. But if you stick around, if you're there for 5 years, then all of a sudden you get 25-30% of the commission that's coming in. You around 8 years, you're all the way up to your full commission percentage. In other words, if you've put in the time and the money and the effort, then you get your percentage when you leave. So that is something that you can also do. And that's just incredibly important. And it's really hard to deal with and really hard to talk about right now. But it's something that it's much easier to talk about it right up front when there's nothing going on, you have nothing on the table, than it is after it's very clear down the line that A, they're annoyed that you're leaving, and B, you have a big person. You know what I mean? So it's really important.
It can be tricky. Those things. And to be very upfront, I mean, my current deal is incredibly simple, and it's one of the things I really like about it. I get as high of a percentage up front as I've heard from anybody. So I have a very nice flat percentage, no draw, commission only, eat what you kill. But the trade-off for that is if I leave, it all stays with the agency, right? So there's a very strong incentive for me to stay. So it's very good. I'm very happy at my agency, and I really love it there, and I really love the people I work with. But there's also this sense, and hopefully my boss isn't watching, but there is this sense that he and I have the kind of relationship that if I were to leave, we could have a conversation about that. And I believe he would be fair. That belief may be disproven would that situation arrive, but also I had faith in the agency, I had faith in the people I was going to work with, and I'm genuinely very happy to be there. So this is not something that I'm concerned about. It was a really tough decision though up front of this is a great deal. It was a really good deal that I have right now. But also what happens if I leave, right? And, all of us at the agency have the same deal. It's very simple. It's very nice. But it's something to think about, right? And it was a tough decision, even though it's one I made very quickly and one that I'm very happy that I made. But that part of it was not simple.
Well, like that, what that really also does is it protects your boss from you getting poached. Like
exactly.
it's much harder for someone to steal you away. So let's talk a little bit about, I mean, and this is all a big thing. So let's talk about the other tricky thing, which is transitions, right? Which is going from being an assistant to being an agent. So the way it usually works is you're receiving your salary, and there's this, and the salary is probably a little bit higher because you've been around a year or two. Maybe not, it's not much, but it's a little bit higher. And then there's this golden moment where you start taking on things and you sell them, and you still are an assistant. So for me, again, I'm speaking of, I want to share. So for me, one of the problems I had at my other place, and one of the reasons why I left, is that I was stuck at 35,000 for like 3 years. And one of the reasons why I wasn't getting raises is that I was starting to make money on commissions. They were like, "Oh, and I was like, that's not really the same thing. One, that's me making you money versus like, I've been around, I need to be respected for, but still I was making this $35,000. But then anytime I sold the book, and if I sold the book at auction for $150,000, and the signing advance for that is $40,000. That's not the right math, but let's just say it was. Then that's a $6,000 check that comes to the company. It's split with me. And by the way, this split is another thing that's going to have to be talked about. Sometimes we'll only give you a third. Some will give you 50%. Some will give you 75, depending on what the thing that you have set up. But I think 50 is often a common thing. So let's just say with 50. So then that would be a $3,000 check coming your way. Now, if you're only commission and you're trying to survive, and you have like 5 deals that you did in a year, you're just starting, and you only get this $3,000 check, that's not going to be enough for you to survive on. However, if you have a budgeted setup where you have a normal salary and then you magically get a $3,000 check, you're like, party, this is great. And then you get a couple other deals and you get a couple other checks that pop in there, and they're really like, is this really wonderful time where all of a sudden I was making like $45,000, $50,000 in the year because of that. And then one day they call you in and they say, hey, you're doing great. Congratulations. We're going to make you a junior assistant. And sometimes that means that junior agent.
Junior agent, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes that means junior agent often means that you're still working in some capacity. So I was still going to be working. They were going to take me off of a desk. I was going to have one agent I was assisting, and they wouldn't raise my salary. So one assistant, $35,000, but then they said, and you're going to have a $15,000 draw now. Congrats. What that means is I have to earn back that money in order to.
Wait. So they were paying you $20,000 salary and then giving you $15,000 draw, or you were getting 40, or you were getting what? 35, 50 total.
I was getting 35 and then 15 against that. So
right. So you were getting 20 and then a $15,000 draw.
Exactly. I was getting because I'm no longer assisting both. I was making $20,000, and then I had to earn back. Well, that's the thing. It was a promotion with a pay cut, and I said, I really like being at Sterling Lord. So I said, I'm really airing the grievances here, but it's just these things that's really important, and surely they know this. And by the way, I loved my bosses. It had nothing to do with my bosses. They're really great, but
also, to be clear, this is the business, right? We're not slagging off on any one agency or any one person. We're talking about our personal experiences because that's what we know. But these are not stories that are limited to us. I mean, almost every shop in town, especially once you get to a certain scale, this is the game. This is how they're playing it. This is why we're telling you the stories. Because you are likely to run into these if you follow the same roads, right?
And it's cautionary. Like, how can you prep to get yourself ready for this kind of thing? Where suddenly I basically had a $15,000 pay cut. And I
do you want to explain what the draw is, why that was a pay cut? Because I understand that, even though I've never had a draw. But
so
I sort of understand it. Actually,
the easiest way to explain a draw is to ignore the flat salary for a second. Let's just say I made a deal where I had a salary of, we're talking 35. Say it's a $35,000 draw. Okay. A draw comes with a negotiated commission split. So what that means is, and let's say it's 50-50. What that means is any money that comes in from my clients, we take 15%, which is the standard agency amount that you take. excuse me, and you take a different percentage for foreign or whatever, but it's 15%. And then you have a negotiated split with your agency of the amount that you get of that. So let's say it's a $100,000 check comes in, which by the way is a very large check to come in at any given time. Then 15% is $15,000. A 50% split of that is $7,500 will come to you.
So 7.5% goes to the agency, 7.5% goes to you,
exactly.
85% goes to the client.
Exactly. So the author gets $85,000 right there. Again, that's a huge amount of money to be rolling in, especially when you're starting. That would basically mean a $400,000 deal minimum, right? So, to be able to do that. So that would be really great. But of that $7,500, the way a draw works is if say I negotiated a $35,000 draw, that's my salary. What that means is I want to make sure that I'm still getting a check to pay for my rent. So that it means every other week, or however it's set up in your company, every month, but usually it's every 2 weeks, I get a check, which is $35,000 divided by the number of every other weeks, in there. So 26. So that amount of money comes to me. It's reliable. I have that. I have to try and make enough money to beat that. So that means that $7,500 that come in goes accounted for against that $35,000. So now suddenly, I have to earn back, $35,000 minus $7,500 left. If at the end of the year I have not earned back that $35,000, different agencies do different things. Some can penalize you and be like, well, you owe us that money in the future, or right now, which would be crazy, but I guess they could do that. Some can basically give you a warning and say,
you say crazy. I know that's happened to multiple people. Right?
Okay. And and you're right, because basically they're fronting you the money. That's what's going on. Yep. So it does make sense that they're allowed to do it. And I've luckily, even at Sterling Water, but never had to have that situation. Otherwise they could say, uh-oh, you're in trouble. Don't do that again. And they keep your salary at the same draw, and you have like a year probation where you try and beat that. And you usually still have to pay that back. So it's basically whatever you're left over. Or there's the other thing that can happen, which is that you make more than the $35,000, and then you have another different negotiated split where you get commission bonuses. So the way it works, and this is my current salary setup, I'm on a draw, is I have a negotiated salary. I'm sorry, it's getting confusing. I have a negotiated salary, and I have to earn back that much in splits to start earning anything above that. And once I get above that, sorry.
Just to run through the numbers real quick, right? So if you have a $35,000 draw, you have a 50% split with your agency, right? Yeah. That means you need to bring in $70,000 in commissions, which is $500,000 in deal volume for that year, right? Yeah. So you need to have, or not even just deal volume, in payments that year, right? So really that's
like $2 million worth of deals.
$2 million in deals, right? Because you're generally getting paid in quarters, right? So that's a lot to do in 1 year as a junior agent, right? And you were looking at a $15,000 draw, so that's bringing in, let's say you had 50-50, that's bringing in $30,000, and you can keep doing that math. That's a lot of money to bring in for 1 year.
Right, and one of the reasons why agenting takes a while to get to its peak, and the peak is really great. And I think that if you're doing good and you have your clients rolling and you have your percentage you're making every year, then you're going to have a great time in agenting. But one of the reasons why it's tough is because you need a lot of different things to support you to do that. So in the beginning, all you really are getting are the early advances. So you're getting signing advances, which is what happens when you sign the contract. Maybe you're getting delivery and accepting advances, which is when an author gives the manuscript and the publisher agrees to it. Maybe you just started getting some publication advances, but it takes 1 or 2 years for a book to start publishing. At this point in time, I get money on royalties from old books. I get money on foreign payments. I get money coming in on the paperback publication. I get money on signing advances. And all those things are coming together to make a perfect storm to support my salary. And that's why it takes basically 4 to 5 years to get that perfect storm. Yeah. When you're starting out.
Just to be really clear about some stuff, my first year of full agenting, I made $16,000, right? I was able to do that because I had savings, and I was able to do that because I owned a house and I lived in a very cheap market, right? These are the things that are important to recognize. And, I hit the ground sprinting, right? I was doing
deals you had a higher split. And you had a higher split than most people.
I had a high split, right? So those are things to be super aware of. And just the economics of being an agent are really tough. in those first few years.
Eh.
I'm at year 5, and this is the first year I'm going to match or exceed my last salary job, right? And it takes a while for that to get rolling. And again, I personally think I've had a very good run. You know what I mean? Like I'm very, very pleased with my track record. And, I know other agents who, have been at this several years and they're on their 4th, 5th deal. And that's tough. It's tough. It's been tough for me. And I feel like I've done well. Right. So I just want to be really upfront and clear about what the economics of this look like. And they're very different than I think what a lot of people assume, because people just hear, oh, you get a commission. Oh, that's a big book. Oh, you sold that for, 6 figures, whatever it is. That money spread out over a long time, and 15% minus your agency commission. So 7.5% is not a big number, even if the deal's a big number.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's incredibly helpful to hear. And I think, it's so tricky. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, one of the greatest things about our job is that it's a lottery in some ways. I hate to think about writers as like lottery tickets, but if you do happen to represent an author who gets a big deal and is also like writes a book a year, which is not an always, but like say we represent John Grisham at our agency. John Grisham is like the ultimate lottery ticket, but he writes one in like a third book a year, and it's of this high level. And you can imagine, like, so for me, I have a number of clients who are repeat authors, maybe not every year, but it's like every 2 years or so, that get really big deals. And they, in my mind, already figured out like are a third to half of my salary, just like landed there. And that's the way it goes. And because Don Juan spoke about transparency, I'll continue that. When I left Gerner Company, Sterling Lord, I had been there for 5 years, still at that $35,000 mark. But I had a lot of clients. I took all the clients with me. I didn't take any money with me, but I did have some deals about to roll in, some pretty big deals. And
you were what, 29, 30 at that point,
I was
right?
29, 30, exactly. I was transitioning to 30. And my 10-year anniversary is in like 3 weeks at Gerner. So, but it's like Taya Albrecht's second book I hadn't sold yet, and I knew it was, so I had some big deals coming. But in general, still, I was starting over again with a good client roster. But I was starting over again. David, one of the reasons why it was great going with David was that David Gerner, was that he gave me a draw of $45,000, but said, I don't expect you to hit this, and it's gonna be okay. It's okay. I'm willing to take a little bit of risk on you, and that was great. And you know what? I didn't hit that.
That's the thing you want from an agency, is an agent that's going to believe in you, right? If they just look at you like a cash cow, then the first time you don't pull in your draw, you're out, or they're going to penalize you in a way that is really unfair, because our business is a tough business, and from year to year it goes up and down, right? And you can't predict what 1 year is going to, or just sometimes there's a weird gap, right? Sometimes you just have a gap in your deal flow, or in clients are late with their books, right? So those delivery payments aren't coming in, so those publication payments aren't coming in, so royalties are delayed a year. Sometimes that'll just lead to a weird gap in your income stream, and that means that you won't hit your draw that year. If you are at a place that isn't investing in you for the future, that means that they're going to penalize you, and then you're out, right? And I have friends who've run into that, who have had to leave their agencies, who've had to try and figure out other shit because they weren't at a place that was treating them with respect and investing in their futures.
Right. And like if a place does that, then for those down years, you're also going to have like that thing that was delayed is going to come the next year, and you're going to have a double boost, or you're going to have a big book that came out of nowhere. You're at the end of the year, oh, I'm not going to hit my draw, and then you sell a book for $1 million. Like those things happen, right? And so again, to talk about transparency, like I did have a pretty good roster, and I think if you're lucky enough to get some big books at the very beginning, that really helps you, but there's nothing you can really do to make that happen. I mean, you just do your best, right? I feel lucky with it happen. My colleague, Chris Paris Lamb, had a big book called Mudbound that started, like some of those things, it just gives you a cushion. But so even though I missed my draw at 45,000, this is what shows how great my boss was, but also shows in some ways how great it is to work at a small place with like again, a John Grisham that provides the money to support the agency at a whole, right? I got a $10,000 raise the next year, even missing the commission. I was then at $55,000, and I hit that draw, and I've never not hit that draw since then. And so just to say that, like, even still, I was able to make that happen. I was able to hit that because he could see it, and we worked together to get there. So
but the thing is, you spent that year pulling in those big deals, convincing your boss, I have what it takes.
Yeah.
And he looked at that. He looked at the deals you did. He looked at the money that was booked for the next year and the year after and said, you know what? Seth's going to hit that. I'm going to actually give him a bump so he stays, and then, show that level of commitment, right? And I think that's important. So when you are looking at what agency you want to join, if you're making that jump, those are all things to really think about. Like, I cannot overstate how much culture and personality matter on the agenting side, right? It matters everywhere, but especially on the agenting side, if your boss is a lunatic, don't go there. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? They're going to screw you over, and they're going to set your career back 5-10 years. And I see it happen over and over and over again to people. You need to work with someone who believes in you, who's going to treat you fairly, and who's going to pay you what you're worth. Sure.
Yeah, and it's all about the culture that's in the place. So feel free to speak to other people that are there, other assistants, other agents that are at a place. And there's another thing we didn't talk about. Another way that you can get ahead is sometimes a boss will share their clients, and sometimes it's a share, sometimes it's a give. So like we had a colleague who we really love, who was the assistant to the president of Sterling Lord back in the day. And the president repped John McCain, and she gave Meghan McCain, which is a very valuable, client, to that assistant. That assistant was great. She deserved it, etc. But that is a thing that wasn't coming to me or Dongwan, you know what I mean? And that's like a huge gift in a lot of ways. So there's also, you can't really ask that in an interview, hey, will you get me? But there are different ways that you can get ahead that can happen.
There's also people who were assistants for a very long time who worked for some of the much, much older, much more senior agents there who, inherited clients from them as they retired or, as they moved out of the business. Then suddenly someone needs to take care of Jack Kerouac's estate, right? Like that's big business. And who is that going to go to, right? And I think that is a question. You sort of end up in Succession, the literary drama version of it. But I think there is an aspect of looking around at the agency too. Like, Dave is going to retire at some point. What happens to John Grisham's estate at that point, right? Those are.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but a good agency is also one that has a very clear succession plan, right? Especially because a lot of the people who run agencies, just by the very nature of the thing, tend to be older, more established, and are looking at what happens to the business long term, right? And so I think those are things to think about. I mean, don't be an aggressive weirdo jerk about it, right? Like, don't be a vulture, but I think being aware of the realities of the situation is also really important. So
and part of what you're saying there is being at a place where you want to stay might lead to great things. And there's also, like, we saw lots of assistants that were staying at a place they were miserable at in the hopes that they would get to take
also a terrible.
It's terrible because a lot of times, because agenting, you could go on forever, like until the day you die, there's just no reason for you to.
I mean, you and I have both known 96-year-olds who come into the office every day, right?
That's Sterling Lord. That was great. So just to clarify, just to reiterate, in terms of like full agenting, the way it can be. So basically, at some point in time in this transition mark, you will then slowly lose your you'll slowly stop assisting, and then you'll be put on like a full draw or on a commission based off of wherever you're at. And that really are the two things. So there's certain places that are only going to be salary wise. Like, again, a place like WME, their salary, even for their full agents, they're just salary. Now it's a big salary with bonuses that happen if you have a book that like pops through in certain ways. And I'm sure there's a negotiated mark there. But also draws can be interesting too. Like for me, and I know it's sort of rare that I have it, but I have a couple specific clients, some of those ones that are bigger, that come in more reliably in a big way and bring in a lot of money to the company, that I have a specific negotiated split for those clients, but not my overall. And I also have an escalated draw whereby my draw gets my percentage, not my draw, my percentage of commission gets higher after I hit a certain number. So I have like a very complicated thing at the end of the year. Like I audit my own self and my boss and whatever to try and make sure it's right.
See, I'm a simple person. I want a simple deal. I can't with all that.
But that's because I started at a simple place and I wasn't able to, and I didn't think I was able to get like just a straight higher number. I had to do something different. But that's
those are all smart moves. And, I all respect to doing those. I was just,
well, one thing that's really important to think about when it comes to your draw, when it comes to something, the more money you make, the less sense it makes that you have an even split. Because why is there a split? The split is for the boss man take money. Sorry for saying man, but to make money themselves, and then to pay for your the overhead. That's an assistant. That's printing. That's mailing. That's legal. That's whatever. It's foreign rights. That's whatever. But once those things get paid, then it's still then it goes back to the boss making money. So that's where your split should be higher because wait.
And that's the point at which people start thinking, oh, I should go for my own agency.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Because then, the overhead costs are a flat cost. And then anything that you do is extra money that you earn. Right.
Yeah.
So for me, part of the reason I have a high split and one of the reasons I like being where I am is that I get to keep that high split, but also the services that I get compared to other agencies are quite low. Like Seth, in the past, you've expressed surprise that I don't have an assistant. It's in part because I'm not paying that much into the agency. You know what I mean?
You could get one, but you'd have to pay it yourself.
Exactly. And, I was remote when I started, so I didn't have a full-time desk. Literally, the only thing that cost my boss at that point was the cost of printing business cards and giving me an email address, right?
Yeah.
Like those were his outlays when he took me on, which was great because it made it a very easy decision to be like, sure, I'll roll the dice on this guy, like whatever. Which isn't to say he didn't believe in me. He absolutely did. But I think for you, it is, as a deal maker, as a negotiator, as an agent, you also need to think about what are you bringing to your company? What are you costing them? What are you making them? And therefore, what are they giving you in return? What are you paying for, right? Because if really what that split is you paying them for services to be part of their agency, right? So that's boilerplate. That's office services, right? Assistant, phones, things like that. That is legal, right? So either their lawyer that's on retainer, any contracts department that they have in-house, that's accounting. That's a big one. For me, basically what I pay for is the pleasure of working with my colleagues, but also the accounting side. I don't have to do the bookkeeping. The money comes in, the money goes out. I don't worry about it, right? That is really what my percentage is going to. And also, supporting the agency in the variety of other ways and smaller ways, paying for the office space, paying for those kind of things. So being aware of what you're paying in for is really important. I happily took the trade-off of, I'm not getting an assistant, I'm not getting healthcare, but I'm taking home more of my share so that I don't have to think about ever starting my own agency and having to hire people and manage an office and do all the things that I just don't want to do, right? I have no interest in doing those things. I want to do my job, which is work with writers and sell books, right?
Right. I think that's a very, very good point. And it is exactly right. And one of the things that when I like try and even sign clients that I talk about with the Gerner Company, say specifically, is that we have a very strong and robust, say, foreign rights. We have 5 agents right now. We have 4 people working in foreign rights. That's one of the things I'm paying for. I run an office in Culver. I don't pay anything for that. I have my whole family on our insurance. I don't pay anything of that. So, and that's not always going to be the case. Insurance, let's make sure you ask about insurance or 401ks, all that stuff too, of course.
I have none of that, right? Insurance is out of pocket for me. I have no 401k, manage my retirement. It's all on me, all those kind of things. And, again, that's the trade-off I'm making.
Exactly. Okay, so before we get to questions, the last thing I wanted to talk about is side gigs, which is other ways you can make money. And they're exhausting, but like I also really needed that when I started out. Like I would go to conferences a lot, and I started really enjoying it. Like especially going to the best ones. Like you go to Aspen, like if you get lucky enough to get invited there, and you're flying to this beautiful place, hanging out with these great people, great authors, great editors, and you're working hard for a little bit, but then you're playing. But they also pay you $1,000, and you're like, that's $1,000 I need, and I'm doing work, I'm networking. So I'm not talking about going to cons to network. We're talking about
writers' conferences,
paid money to go to a place, usually a writers conference, which is, people who want to be writers and they need agents there. Usually it is some really annoying work where you're reading between 15 to 300 pages of manuscripts that you get paid to do things at, but
anywhere between $20 and $75 per thing that you're doing.
Exactly.
Often.
But you can
negotiate your rates. Yeah,
exactly.
Negotiate your rates. A thing that it took me way too long to realize I needed to be doing this. I'm very good at negotiating for my clients, terrible at negotiating for myself sometimes, right? So learning to ask conferences, being like, just routinely being like, oh yeah, can you pay X dollars, 50% more, whatever it is, and they'll come back with a number, and then I'm like, sure, fine. I would have done it for the lower number probably, but also conferences are very draining, and you need to think about the cost that you're going to spend in, taking a cab to the airport, buying lunch in the airport, whatever it is, and make sure that you are being paid enough that it's worth it. I can't tell you how many times I've lost money in a writer's conference and then realized that later and been deeply annoyed that I did all that. So, I had a year where I just said yes to everything because I'm an idiot. So, now I have a rule is if you're not paying me at least $800, there's no way I'm going, right? If my shorthand for that is
also a preeminent agent. So it's like your own value, right? It's like where you are. These things really matter. And it is networking a little bit. Like I signed Mary Robina Coel probably because I met her at a writer's conference. I, connected with Colin McCann and Marlon James before he was anyone really at this random thing in West Pennsylvania, in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania at a conference. And those things led to blurbs and to this and to that. And then, things like those things really do matter. And it can be exhausting, but it's also...
you'll teach a workshop with an editor and then you'll end up selling that editor a book a year later, right? Like those kind of things happen all the time too.
Okay. I feel like we did an okay job diving into that a little bit. We're at 56 minutes. So let's answer one or two questions. What can we do for you guys? Not many questions rolling in on the side because we've done such a good job. Let me read Matt's here. Wait, what were you going to say, Don?
Well, let me just, while we're waiting for questions to come in, on side gigs, for me, those really broke down into 3 different categories, right? One was doing gigs for other people at the agency. So for a couple of the other agents, I was editing their proposals before they went out, right? And they were paying me to do editorial work for them in-house. And, that was a nice thing. My boss would do that for me sometimes.
What were they paying you?
Like not
it's
much,
important.
Like $20, $50.
So people understand the context. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember honestly, but it wasn't an enormous amount, right? It was enough that it was a couple drinks, it was dinner or something like that, right? One person memorably paid me with a bottle of Prosecco, and I was like, I put a lot of work into this thing, and you just sold that for $250,000. Fuck off. But there was that, there's readers reports, right? You can get paid to do those either for your agency or for somebody else, right? I know a lot of people, even editors, I know work as readers. You can also do freelance editing on the side, right? So, look at a site like Readsy where you can list your services. So I know a lot of assistants who do editorial work on the side. And then for me, once I became a full agent, it was teaching, right? I used to teach at PSU. I was an adjunct there, doing all these workshops. So me building up a brand as a teacher in addition to an agent has been really good, both for my profile, but also just a little bit of extra income on the side. So anyways,
that makes a lot of sense.
We now have a question.
So Mark asked the question, as an agent, are you helping facilitate side gigs for your clients at conferences, or is that something authors largely handle on their own? And I would say it's both. It's both. It's some, because frankly, the rule is we commission the things that we handle. So sometimes there's an author has no interest in us touching their $500 for like a conference thing that they can easily handle. But then when you think about something like speakers gigs, which is a conference as well, a speakers bureau, they take 25%. Okay. And they don't cut us in, which is whatever crazy. So I will do that for my clients and negotiate perfectly fine rates. From my biggest clients, I've made deals for up to $65,000, $70,000 for like an hour-long talk, plus book buys, and I negotiate that. That's part of my deal, and I get a commission on that. But also sometimes, just as an agent, as a friend, like I'll do some things. I'll help out a little bit or whatever, because they're your clients and you want to, and you don't want to take their cut. Or so it's really a little bit of a loosey-goosey kind of thing. But we do that, and it's not. I don't think. But it's not something I'll guarantee to my clients, like rolling, because it doesn't make sense to do it.
my kind of rule of thumb is, if I originated the contact, if I'm the one who sort of made it happen, then I'll commission it. If it came from the client or came in randomly, then I generally let it go, unless I'm doing real negotiation either on a contract or on the fee. So if I'm bumping that fee up significantly, then I'll commission it. But in general, like if I'm not bumping it enough that it covers my a commission as well, I'm not going to commission it because that seems ridiculous. Yeah. So it's sort of, I play by ear, depends on the situation really.
But mind you, I will say that it's important that you do get that bump and that we do. That's one of the reasons why even that you might be saying, well, why do it at all if you're bumping it up and they're just taking that commission? Because you're setting a base. So that means your author can say, my base is 2,500, and the next time my base is 3,500, and my next time my base is 5,000. If they can't get 5,000, then that's fine. But once you have like a true base, it keeps going, and it's your quote, so it really matters. Okay, your turn.
Matt Belford, would you recommend agents offer paid query critiques, or do you think that flirts with the AAR canon of ethics? So I do paid query critiques through somebody, right? So if it's through a writers conference or, a charity thing or something like that, that's when I do paid query critiques. I don't charge people who are querying me, right? If you send me an email asking for me to represent you, I'm not going to then say, pay me $20 and I'll critique this for you. That I keep those channels very, very separate. And I think that's an important ethical thing. I'm not a member of the AAR, sorry guys. So I don't know what the AAR canon of ethics are that clearly, but for me, that's an important ethical line.
What he said, absolutely. Okay, so we're zooming through. We're doing great. Eleanor, hi. How uncommon is the diagonal move from full assistant, no clients, at one agency to junior to agent or associate agent at another agency? Or does it almost start as having a slower transition with an agency? That's a really great question.
Pretty common, I would say.
Well, I mean, I would say I think it's common if there is like a clear set of potential for a place to be hiring you and putting you on. So basically, they could do it the way that, like, Dongwon's place works, whereby they basically aren't paying you anything and you're on a something and there's no risk, right? But the risk is that they trust you, right? But we, for instance, who are looking actively to hire, and I've met with a lot of really good people, we don't want to hire anyone who doesn't have a list. We don't want a big list. We want an up and coming person, but we want something where we have a clear delineation of what they're doing and what's going on and who these people are. And we're looking for something specific. So I actually would say that it is common, like Dongwon was saying, but it reduces your ability to get what you want or to get to all the places. Yeah. That's what I was saying.
I guess it's also common where you'll have one or two people, right, who are good and you've proven you can do this, and then you make that jump, right? Yeah. But I do think it's a good way to go from the complication of transitioning from assistant to full time, especially because it gets hard with like the power dynamics and the respect dynamics, because when someone's used to you working for them, it can be hard for that to transition to, oh, you're a peer, you're a colleague. So sometimes making that jump is important, depending on the personal dynamics as well. So I do think it's something to think about as you're building up your list, depending on how you feel about your agency, depending on who's hiring, depending on who you know, those kind of things. So,
yeah.
Anyways,
let's answer one more. Let's answer Maria's question.
Great. Thinking radically, do you think the industry will ever see better, different, still practical pay structure? I get that agency budget is limited by commission/revenue, but the system isn't ideal. No, it is not ideal. It is, in fact, terrible. And, it's terrible in a way that I think reinforces structural problems when it comes to representation, when it comes to diversity. I think there's a reason most people in this business look very similar to each other, right? And, I don't necessarily mean visually, I mean sort of like in terms of their profile, in terms of coming from a privileged background, having gone to a certain set of schools, having certain perspectives, right? So, and that is because, as I delineated, that pay jump is really hard to weather, right? And living in New York City on $30,000 a year is not an easy thing to do. If you have student loans, if you don't have generational wealth, if you don't have these things in place, it's structurally not conducive to bringing in people who aren't already of a certain category, right?
And if you have to get an internship or go to Columbia publishing course to get even those initial jobs, so you're already like behind months of something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So Is there a different model? I certainly hope so. I think diversifying out of New York City is going to be the first step in that. And, I think we are all now learning that, hey, you can do this job remotely. And, I think that is, and, I think publishers can do the jobs remotely too. And I think that's disrupting it a little bit. Is that enough? No. And I don't know what the steps are past that. But, that's Maria, you've identified the problem, right? For me, that is the problem that publishing faces. If we're aside from dealing with Amazon and book sales and the general ecosystem, but as an industry, in terms of our hiring practices, this is the core problem. And I don't have a solution for it, but boy, do we need one, in my view.
Well, it feels like the closest solution would actually have to probably be along the salary lines, almost like there's no more draws. And it's not to say there's no more draws, but rather everyone needs to be at like a base salary, like everyone, so that you have what is like a standard being created, so that when you're transitioning over, it doesn't disappear. So that like I, who've been around forever, still have, say, like a base salary of some certain amount of money. It could be way lower, and then I get a commission that moves up. I'm thinking about this in terms of the fact that then we can have an industry standard, as opposed to something where everyone gets to lay the excuses on your success based off of your clientele. And mind you, yeah, sure, your clients, like, you eat what you kill, but like this is about calling like value in humanity and being part of a team and being a member there by having a set of like a set of salaries. I definitely do think that you should be getting commission checks. I think that's like what ends up being the true value of being an agent. But I think for that start thing, it really is also the punishment, and it allows a boss to say, you don't deserve it because your commission isn't showing that. Whereby if everyone had to pay a certain amount of money and there was a set scale that came all the way through, then that's the price of doing business, and it gets absorbed in the success of all the higher ranking agents in order to be able to help lift up people. And that to me feels like the most notable way of succeeding. And I don't really know how to do that either. I mean, I think that my company is great because, again, my boss is willing to just do the draw thing, but not care. But like not care, but like, So I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. And I think the diversification out of the city is also the other big.
Yeah, which we're seeing among agencies in particular. But anyways, we are over time at this point, so we're going to call it there. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning into Agent Talk with Seth and Dongwon. We always appreciate seeing those repeat names here. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we hope you found it somewhat useful and illuminating. And thank you for bringing excellent questions, as always. Seth, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and my website at Seth Fishman. SethASFishman.com. Yep, that's it. I don't know why I keep having a hard time answering that question.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Dongwon. I'm also on Instagram at Dongwon_. And I have a newsletter called publishingishard.substack.com. I sent out a post yesterday, so you can go check it out there. Thank you guys again for tuning in. We will be back next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And until then, be good. I screwed up our tagline. Be good. Read more. Publish better. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, y'all.
Bye, y'all.